Today I'm going to do a review as well as provide you some tips and tricks for this new Red Heart Granny Square all-in-one yarn. Now, I'm a lover of all things granny squares, and one of the biggest frustrations is that you have to have quite a number of skeins to be able to get the different colors. Also, a lot of folks hate weaving in the ends. It's time consuming and it can be frustrating. So Red Heart came out with this self-striping yarn essentially that is supposed to work up just like this. I was really excited about this yarn. So I bought 4 different skeins and I've made about 20 different squares in different colors, as you can see here. But we are going to be using this colorway today because I'm planning a project with this color story here. So first and foremost, you'll find on the packaging, if you look on the inside, it will give you a couple of different patterns or one pattern in particular. This is the vest that I think they show on the front. It'll also give you the pattern for the granny square that they recommend that you use. I do not like this. I did not use this. This is not my preferred method of granny square. I did try this to see if it would actually work the way it was supposed to, and it still did not. So right there, if you have a preferred method of granny square, you can probably use it. I'm going to use the reverse granny square method. Also, in the instructions, they do recommend that you use a 4.5 millimeter hook. From the many different squares that I have made with this yarn, I cannot use a 4.5 hook. I just cannot use it. So I actually had to size all the way up to a 6 millimeter. And this is my sweet spot. This may not work for you depending on your tension and how you actually crochet, but I did find that I primarily work at the 6 millimeter, and then if I have to tighten something up, which you will be doing a lot of that, by the way, you'll be doing a lot of adjusting, then I might use my 4.5 millimeter. All right, so like I mentioned, some of the pros that are touted with this yarn is that there are less ends to weave in and less yarn for you to carry. This is great if you're going on a road trip maybe and you can't bring like 5 different color skeins with you. This might be a great option. Less ends to weave in, however, I will tell you, honestly, it takes less time to make my own granny square, even with 5 different color changes and hiding all of the tails, than it does to make one of these granny squares. But it does still have benefits. Again, if you don't have a lot of space and you're traveling, this could be the right option for you. Some of the cons, it does take time. There is a definite learning curve to this. All of your squares are the same, so you'll find that you cannot adjust how this color goes on here. You can find the coordinating colors from Red Heart though, so that is a bonus. But if you're just gonna buy the coordinating yarn anyway, it's gonna be cheaper because these skeins do retail for about $10 for one skein. So what I have found, in order for me to use up enough yarn to meet the color change perfectly, I do need to leave a pretty long tail. So I leave about 12 inches. And for this particular pattern, I am going to be doing the chain 4 slip stitch method to start. So I'm using my 6 millimeter hook, and then we're gonna chain 4. Once we do that, we're just gonna slip stitch the ring together and chain 3. Again, I'm keeping my tension very loose. So that chain 3 is going to be the start of our first cluster. And then we're going to do 2 double crochets back into our center ring. Again, very loose tension. For this pattern, I'm going to use a modified version of what I typically do. So I am going to do chain 3 for the corner pieces. So 1, 2, 3, and then again, we'll create the next set of clusters, which are 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets, etc. So we get our 4 clusters. All right, so once I get down here to my last cluster, I want to take a look and see how much yarn I have left. So looking at this, I'm going to need to be able to create cluster and 3 chains from what I have left here. In fact, it'll go to here because there is this annoying visible color change between the colors, which I absolutely can't stand, but it is what it is. So looking at this, just from how many times I've done this, I don't quite have enough. So I have a couple of options, same for you. So I can frog this and start over, tightening my tension. If I think that I have maybe a little bit left, I could just frog a little bit and tighten my tension and maybe size down with my hook. And I think I might do that. So I feel like with this last cluster here, I'm gonna switch to a 4.5 millimeter. And I'm gonna pull out all 3 of those clusters. I think I'm just gonna tighten this up just a little bit. Now, let's go ahead and do that final cluster with a chain 3. Start with the first one. I'm gonna go a little bit tighter. I'll loosen up as I go, just so I can monitor where this final is. And then I'll do that final one here. And I want to show you this because I think it's a great learning opportunity. So what we've learned from this is that my tension was too loose. And again, this is the biggest frustration with working with this yarn. You really have to just continue to adjust. The first round is the most frustrating because once you hit the first round, the others will not be as challenging. So let's go back. Again, I'm going to go just a little bit further and tighten up my tension because I was almost there. Okay, so we finished our last cluster and now we just need to do a chain 3. Now, you may be wondering, well, is this gonna look really bad because this color change, right, where it transitions is showing here? No, because this is actually gonna be covered up with the next cluster. So this actually is exactly what we're looking for. Then you're going to slip stitch into the top of our first chain 3. And there we go. And that is round 1 complete. So now we're gonna switch back to our larger hook. So for round 2, my notes say that I just do a 6mm hook with loose, really loose tension. So that's what we're gonna do. So I'm going to chain 1 and then I'm going to turn. So that is the reverse granny square method that I use, it's the easiest method that I found. I like the aesthetics of it, and I have been able to get it to work with this. So now we're going to chain 2 more times, essentially the first double crochet, and then we are going to use the exact same pattern. So 3 double crochet, 3 chain. Then we are going to add a chain 1 between the clusters. Again, that's a little bit modified from what I typically do, but in order to get this yarn to work, I do have to do that. So we're back here at the corner. So we still need to do chain 3 and then our last cluster and then a chain 1. So you can eyeball how much yarn you have left. So we want to get it to that point right there. We may have enough, but I'm actually going to tighten up my tension just a little bit. And then if we chain 1, here's where we are. So we are not quite there. So what this actually tells me is that I need to either size up my hook, which I'm not going to do. I don't use anything higher than a 6mm on this project. So it does tell me that I probably had a little bit too tight of a tension. I did increase my tension over here. So we have a little bit of wiggle room. So I'm actually going to frog back to here, back to our chain. And then I'm just going to do even looser tension than I did before. All right, now we're back on that chain 1, and there we go. Now we made it. So we're gonna slip stitch, and that is round 2. So you'll see the second round didn't take quite as long because once you start to get the hang of it, you can tighten and adjust as you need to without having to start all the way over. So let's go on to our next round. And then we're going to continue our pattern all the way around with our 6mm hook with loose tension. So if you were looking at this, again, think to yourself, how would I make this work? I have too much yarn left over. So if there's too much yarn left over, it means that I need to loosen my tension. And I do find that I typically have really tight tension, which is why I'm using a 6mm hook. So I'm going to frog back all the way because these look pretty loose over here. So I'm going to frog back to here. Loose, very loose. So now we just need to do a chain 1, which I'm going to do really loosely here. And now we just met the transition. And that is round 3. And do you see it's so much easier once you get that first one done? Now you start to have more of a feel for, do you need to size down, size up, increase your tension? The more you do it, the more it'll really get comfortable for you. All right, so now we're on our 4th round. Now with this round, what you need to be mindful of is not only do you have your corner, but you also will have another cluster here. So this is where, when you're looking at how much yarn you have left and trying to decide whether, at this point you want to adjust. So just be aware you still have another cluster in here. This is all I have left. This is definitely not enough to do a full cluster. So what I'm going to do is I am going to just frog back just here, and I'm going to switch back to my 4.5mm. And we're a little bit over, but that's not going to bother me because, again, the amount of work that it takes to frog back and have to go back, this is where you'll make your decisions on what you're willing to live with and what is not acceptable. And there's our chain 1. Okay, so see, we got back to there and now we're perfectly matched. So that is round 4. Now for the final round, this is my favorite round. And you know why that is? Because I do not have to really worry about tension. So for the final round, for me in particular, because I typically always have yarn left over as opposed to not enough yarn. So for me, for the final round, I'm actually just going to switch to my 5mm hook for the last round. If I do 6mm, I'm afraid I might use up all the yarn. If I use 4.5mm, I'm afraid it might be too tight. But the 5 is just perfect for me for the last round, and it also allows me to tighten it up just a little bit to give more of a polished finish. So we are back to that final corner with the additional cluster right here. And what I will show you is how much we have left over. So as we can just eyeball this and see, we have a lot of this cream color left over. So I don't have to make any adjustments because I'm not trying to meet this color change now. All I'm trying to do is make sure that I don't go over the color change. And that is how much white or cream color we have left over. So you can see here that there is a little bit of wiggle room here on the end, but it does work up just nicely, even though it's a little bit tighter tension. If for some reason when you're doing this, let's say that you constantly are going over what you need, that's when you need to tighten your tension or size down on your hook. But when you go to start the next square, so this is a big tip here. So when you go to start the next square, just remember, if you go into this purple at all, so let's say you have the perfect matchup right here when you get to the end, you need to make sure you take that into consideration because this is going to be the center color of your next square. So anything that you take off of this specific yarn right here will definitely have an impact on this. Once you're done with your granny square, now you just have 2 yarn tails to weave in as opposed to the 5 that you typically would have with a regular granny square that looks like this. In fact, that I think is one of their taglines: no color switching, keep on stitching. So the pros are less ends to weave in and less yarn skeins to carry around. But the cons, it takes time. There is a learning curve. You have to constantly be mindful of how you're going to adjust, whether it's sizing up, sizing down, increasing, decreasing tension, and that does take time. All squares are going to be the same color, so you can't change the order of your colors, which also is a con. But the pro, as I mentioned before, you can find the coordinating colors out there from Red Heart, so that is definitely a plus. I already mentioned it is expensive as well. So at $10 a skein, is it worth it? In my opinion, I don't think so on a regular basis. I have a few skeins of this and I'm going to create some really great projects with it. But going forward, unless it's on sale, I will not be picking this up just on a regular basis. But if it goes on sale, 100%, I would get it. So that is my full review, my tips and tricks on how to work with this Granny Square all-in-one yarn. Let me know if you have any questions. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, everybody, see ya!